You'd think that if someone forged a signature on a court document that was used to take a baby away, the mess would be straightened out pretty quick and they'd be arrested for stuff like, kidnapping, especially if the perp was an attorney who'd already been disbarred, arrested, convicted, and imprisoned for similar crimes. Well, that's probably true elsewhere, but not in Oregon, or at least not in Lynn County. There's a case there that's almost a decade old, and even though the mom was the victim of forgery, identity theft, and fraud, she still doesn't have her baby back. She hasn't even seen a photo of him since 2015. He's 9 now. Worse, nobody's been arrested and nobody seems to care. Worse, a judge is letting it happen. He's even going to schedule a trial where mom will have to prove she's a fit person before she can be reunited with her stolen kid. That mom is Blaney Elkins, and in 2015, attorney Megan Perry walked into court and claimed that her baby was in immediate danger and showing signs of fetal alcohol syndrome. Perry had a consent form that Elkins had signed. Within 2 hours, the court appointed the baby's grandma as his temporary guardian, and a few days later, it was made permanent. The problem was the consent document was forged, and Perry never even served Elkins with the pile of garbage. If she had, Elkins would have told the judge that it was forged, and everyone could have lived happily ever after. Instead, her son just never came back from Grandma's house in Utah. Before you ask, yes, Elkins did go to the police, repeatedly, but since Perry was a reputable attorney at the time with a legitimate-looking court order and Elkins had a misdemeanor on her record, the police completely ignored her cries for help. Perry certainly knew the kind of person she could help steal a baby from. The fact remains that Elkins is the only person who can verify her signature, and she says that ain't it. It clearly doesn't match others from the time. I believe her, and I would even if I hadn't known that passing forged garbage court orders was Perry's thing. If you're unfamiliar with her work, she was an attorney for just 4 years, the bulk of which she spent cosplaying as an upstanding member of the legal community. In reality, Perry was quietly amassing 25 bar complaints, which at one point were arriving at the rate of 1 per week. Several of them alleged forgeries by her, and almost all alleged fraud. We now know that they were all true because she voluntarily disbarred herself in April 2018 rather than defend that conduct. The fact that fully 10% of her clients filed bar complaints against her should have resulted in an investigation into every single case she ever touched. In May 2019, Perry was finally arrested for identity theft and custodial interference. That's kidnapping when done by a close family member. Perry had forged 3 signatures on 2 fraudulent documents, including an affidavit of service and a U.S. mail receipt. The Lynn County Sheriff was investigating additional crimes, including Elkins. But a year later, the feds suddenly took up the state's case and added the serious charge of wire fraud, but halted everything else. Who knows why, like if Perry ratted out an accomplice or something, but it is what it is, and those victims never got their day in criminal court. For Elkins, that meant that she had to go wade into the cesspool of a civil case where the crime originally occurred and was ongoing and face off against Grandma, Donna Dove, who is apparently untroubled that her daughter's signature had been forged. So Elkins' attorney filed a motion to dispose of the fraudulently obtained order. That was in July 2021. Now, you'd think that Perry's disbarment and especially her conviction for conduct almost identical to the crimes committed against Elkins, well, you'd think that it would have fast-tracked the motion, but opposite. There's been no hearing scheduled on Judge Brendan Kane's calendar, and Elkins hasn't been allowed to speak once in 2 years or even simply enter her name into the record. But there have been several hearings for motions filed by Dove's new attorney, who picked up the baton of prejudice that Perry dropped and is racing towards the finish line. Dove refuses to provide Elkins with any photos of her son, which is petty and disturbed, but she's also withholding his complete medical records. The few Elkins has seen showed Dove aggressively poisoning the boy's caregivers with false allegations about his mom. The missing records also suggest Dove has been doctor shopping the boy for reasons I'm not going to speculate about. Other records show that Dove long ago dumped the baby with his aunt in California, even though she had no authority to do so and gave the court no notice of his whereabouts. He was hastily moved back to Utah right after Perry's disbarment, enrolled in elementary school under an entirely fictitious first and last name, and his aunt has been identifying herself as his mother. Only when Elkins' motion was filed did Mom suddenly admit to the school she was really just his aunt. It's incredible that those Utah administrators allowed such a deviant enrollment and never once wondered, like, hey, is this kid a kidnapping victim? But perhaps the most telling sign that Dove is not actually concerned with her grandson's well-being is that she opened a garbagey case in Utah to terminate Elkins' parental rights and abandoned it the second the Utah judge insisted she actually serve Elkins with the documents. When I first investigated the Oregon case file, I discovered a few things. There was never even a hearing in 2015, and Perry had submitted no actual evidence to the court. Also, service of Elkins was mandatory and could not have been waived by her forged signature or even her real one. But most significantly, the statutes did not allow for a permanent guardianship. It's deeply troubling that then Judge David Delsman signed the order, but since Perry had forged his signature in another case just a few months later, who knows if he actually signed off on this one. What I can say is that Perry's garbage filings and false allegations were designed to prejudice the court and get Granny a baby she wasn't entitled to, while leaving a pile of toxic waste in the place of the actual record for Elkins to deal with. And surprised, it worked. Even though Elkins has 2 other kids of her own and has fostered for DHS, she now faces parenting evaluations and a trial in order to possibly have some time with her own kids someday. It's clear that this is no longer about her son's welfare. It's about covering up everyone's mistakes, and that is not acceptable. How confident am I about calling former Oregon attorney Megan Perry a forger who helped steal a baby? Well, you'll notice that I don't bother to say allegedly about her because I'm confident she doesn't want to appear against me in court again. Because the last time Perry had me on the witness stand in 2016, when she was still licensed, I testified that I was certain that she was a forger and a fraud and helping someone get a child they didn't deserve. There was some doctor shopping in that case also. She laughed at me, and so did the judge. But less than a year later, neither of them had a job anymore. The judge had been pressured to resign halfway through her first term, apparently because of that case. I laughed when I heard about them both. But I'd much rather have helped bring a kid to safety than get the last laugh when a judge got fired or an attorney disbarred. I'm guessing that Elkins would agree.